Hello wonderful scholars, it's Mr. Alan. I'm glad to be your host in today's lesson. So I want you to keep your fingers crossed, have an open mind and learn as much as you can from the illustrations I'll be giving in a short while from now. I hope we're all ready. Today's topic is environmental pollution, part 3. In the previous classes, we've looked at environmental pollution, part 1 and 2. So in today's lesson, we're going to take a step further to look at other aspects of pollution in the environment. So we're learning to analyze the consequences or effects of pollution on the health of people in the environment. And in this particular session, we're looking at water and air pollution particularly, and looking at what effects they cause to man and other animals, including plants in the environment. What I'm looking for is your ability to identify some effects of pollution on the health of people and think of preventive measures, because as young scientists, you learn concepts in science. You are meant to look for ways you can apply them to solve man's problems or to help the environment. So be an environmental activist or an environmental advocate who advocates for a healthy environment. What form of pollution is represented in this picture? I want you to make a guess. Did I hear water pollution? You guessed right. So if you look at this environment, a lot of activities has taken place from humans' daily activities, and a lot of waste, solid materials or objects have been directly emptied into this water body, or some probably washed into this water body by the effect of runoff water from rainfall and so on. So if you look at this water body right now, it is an eyesore because does not give a good sight of this environment. And in this same water, there are aquatic organisms, both plants and animals, that dwells or lives there. Now they require dissolved oxygen from the air to dissolve on the surface of the water so that they can get a supply of oxygen. They also require a clean environment so that they could carry out their daily activities. But with this, the effect on them is that they don't get enough supply of oxygen, because some of this solid waste on this water body blocks the amount of oxygen that's supposed to dissolve in this water for them to absorb for respiration. So there is reduced amount of oxygen in such water bodies. There is no enough oxygen supply, and some animals eventually die from that point. So that's a very bad effect. Now looking at this, environmental pollution is considered the main cause of respiratory diseases. Who can guess what kind of pollution is taking place around these industries or factories? Look at the chimney. A lot of smoke is being disseminated by burning fossil fuels. And when this happens, you can be sure that the air is no longer clean and safe for humans, other animals, including plants, as it has a devastating effect in their daily existence. One of the major causes of respiratory disease, which we call probably the lung cancer, breathing difficulties, and many more difficulties that has to do with taking in air and releasing carbon monoxide, is caused by air pollution. So we need to fight against air pollution. As much as possible, try to minimize or reduce the discharge of carbon monoxide or harmful smoke into the air. Now, what are the causes and effects of air pollution? We'll just look at one of them just now. Another picture here shows us the statistics taken about air pollution, which is tagged as the silent killer. Look at this particular message here. Every year, around 7 million deaths are due to the exposure from both outdoor and household air pollution. So this is like a world statistic that was taken by the United Nations on environmental pollution that has to do with air. So it affects the brain. You can see stroke. This picture shows stroke of the brain, heart diseases, lung cancer, and both chronic and acute respiratory diseases, including asthma, results from air pollution. You look at a lot of asthmatic patients gasping for breath, and if they don't have their inhaler close by, some of them choke and might eventually die. So this is a result of air pollution that comes from the exhaust pipes of cars, of generators, chimneys in kitchens, chimneys in the factories or the industries that carries out one or two production on a daily basis. So take your time to pause this video at any point in time to look at these statistics very well and see the devastating effects of air pollution. Now, clean air for health. If we must have clean air, then we will have to regulate the amount of bush burning, the rate at which there is gaseous discharge from our generator sets, by ensuring that we have a very good engine and the engine does not produce too much smoke. We need to have soundproof generators just to try to minimize, because we cannot completely stop the release of air or the release of gases the case may be, because we daily have to burn things as a way of reducing or taking care of waste. We have to burn coal in order to release energy for some engines to move. We need to burn fossil fuel for our cars to move from one place to the other. So we can only try to minimize and not to completely eradicate. But as much as possible, let's try to reduce it to the barest minimum. Look at this picture here. You can pause it at any point in time to see the statistics. Now, 790,000 excess deaths due to ambient air pollution per year in Europe. Now, this is the statistics taken in Europe. When we say ambient air is the normal serenity that you find around an environment that prevails in the air. But when we introduce harmful substances like carbon monoxide, sulfur gases, chlorofluorocarbons, and other harmful gases, then this is the result, and it's not a good one. As you can see stroke 8%, 40% heart disease, lung cancer 7%, 6% COPD, 7% pneumonia, and other non-communicable diseases. Okay, let's move on. A continuation of this topic, environmental pollution. We are learning to analyze the consequences or effects of pollution on health of people in the environment. So in this particular segment of the lesson, we are looking at the effect of land and noise pollution on people. So what I'm looking for is your ability to identify some effects of pollution on the health of people and think of preventive measures. Let's look at this picture. Who can guess what is happening here? So the question underneath is, what form of pollution is represented in this picture? Did I hear you say land pollution, or water is flowing in between two lands? Would you say it's water pollution? Okay, it's both. We have both water pollution and land pollution, but I'm focusing on the land or soil pollution here. Now, what actually flows through this pathway has divided the land into a gully where water could pass. So some of the solid waste dumped around this vicinity has been moved into it by the action of wind, or maybe some animals coming by and pushing them in with their legs and so on. If you look at this solid waste, it doesn't give a good sight about this environment. You cannot really tend to relax around here because it is not hygienic enough, it's not presentable, and you might feel very uncomfortable having something worthwhile to do around here. And that's one of the effects of land pollution, because it tends to scare people away from using this place for events or for some important activities. Though a lot of it decomposes, while the non-biodegradable materials there will remain for long and tend to obstruct the burrows of microorganisms that causes erosion in the soil. And some other important activities of animals cannot take place around this vicinity because of the presence of solid waste. In a nutshell, it's an eyesore to me, and I believe it is so to you. So we try to reduce the rate at which we dispose these things. Let's dispose them at the right channels and take them to a dump site where they are properly handled to avoid soil or land pollution. Now, if you take a look at this city, you have a lot of refuse dumped along the pathway of a major road in the city. You can see commuters, people moving on bicycles, people moving on foot, cars parked, some cars moving. I'm sure there are some business areas around these streets. Some residences might be located around there. This does not speak well of the people living around there, because it cannot be a site of tourist attraction because it doesn't look good. And to their health, this can harbor a lot of vectors like flies that causes dysentery or cholera. It harbors mosquitoes that causes malaria through the release of plasmodium, and a lot of other vectors that this can be a hideout for. So in order to avoid that, there need to be an evacuation of this waste to the dump site so that it is far away from where people live. Okay, moving on. These are some other causes of pollution. Now we have sewage and wastewater release into the environment. Sewage is the collection of waste from our septic tanks, our kitchen tanks, that includes both solid and liquid waste together, urine, passe, and feces mixed in form of liquid. So when they are released into the environment indiscriminately, they cause water pollution. Then marine dumping, where people tend to empty their waste into water bodies, especially when it rains. That is not a good attitude, because it goes a long way to block our drainages and cause flooding, and at some point it might become harmful to people in the environment as it takes and destroys lives and properties. Then we have industrial waste, like used chemicals. When they are released into water bodies, it causes a major threat to aquatic organisms. Then radioactive waste. There are some elements we call radioactive elements that spontaneously or voluntarily release energy back to the environment, and this energy has a very high potency to even cause cancers. We call them carcinogenic waves. Now, oil pollution. When oil spills maybe from a ship or from a car to the land or to soil, and eventually is washed into water bodies, they cause a lot of harm to both land and sea or aquatic organisms. Then underground storage leakages, when we have storage like in fueling station where they store fuels underground that is dispensed through a dispenser for people to buy. Whenever there's a leakage, it causes soil pollution and it might eventually lead to damages to aquatic life too, or other microorganisms that are found within that sphere of contact. Then atmospheric deposition, that's when there's excess release of poisonous gases from the environment due to bush burning, car exhaust, generator exhaust, and it tends to pollute the atmosphere. It doesn't make us to have a good atmosphere. It makes everywhere cloudy and you cannot breathe very well. Then global warming is as a result of the release of sulfur oxides and carbon dioxide or carbon monoxide. These gases are gases that has the ability to store heat. When they accumulate in the air, when the sun's energy reaches them, the energy that is released from the earth also that goes to them is supposed to dissipate and diffuse into the atmosphere, but this energy is trapped by these gases and sent back in a very high quantity to the earth, and we feel excessively hot. That is what we call global warming. So all this leads to environmental pollution. The second type of pollution I'm talking about in this lesson is the noise pollution. Noise pollution occurs when machines, moving cars, generators, and so on produce excessive noise. And this picture shows you the noisiest cities in the world. You have China, you have Cairo, you have New Delhi, Mumbai, you have Barcelona, Beijing, Istanbul, you have Mexico City, you have Paris, then you have Buenos Aires, that's in Argentina. Now, what we are saying is simply that noise pollution does not make us feel comfortable. It causes a lot of displeasure and mostly leads to insomnia, inability to sleep. And there's a class activity here. You need to identify what kind of pollution or what kind of pollutant is represented in this picture. Now, when you have a refuse dump, what kind of pollution will it cause? Land pollution. Guess for B, what kind of pollution will it cause? I won't say that. Say that yourself. What kind of pollution will C cause as a pollutant? What kind of pollution will picture D cause as a pollutant, picture E and picture F respectively? So your time starts now. So in a nutshell, we looked at the effects of the 4 types of pollution on people and other animals in the environment. Simply put, we are saying that the aftermath, or whenever these pollutions take place, it causes a lot of harmful effects to plants and animals, making life unbearable. So let's be an environmental advocate and advocate for a healthy environment for us and our future generation.